The politicians. They're the ones who want special powers naturally, because they're in the power game. And what they can get from Ottawa, they will have more in Charlottetown, in Quebec City, in Victoria, BC. That's the game of politics, power.
And how long would it take to, do you think it would take to implement any of these changes, I guess, here, required to implement the changes required to return the power back to the people? I guess if you want to answer that while I get this rocking.
Well, here's the thing. It depends on how long it takes to inform most of the people. How long will it take for us to do the constitutional committee meetings? How many people do we get to come out, et cetera, and how long before the cognitive dissonance in most of the people is broken, and they come to the final realization of, oh my God, we've had the power all this time. Let's implement. That's what I call critical mass. When we hit critical mass, it will be anywhere from 30 to 90 days before you see the de jure government. Let's take a walk up to 1946. 1946, there was an interesting thing that happened. Okay, so in 1946, the King of England appointed a Governor General to Canada, and his name was Harold Alexander of Tunis. And so he was appointed by the King of England. Now, the King of England had actually no claim to Canada, as we saw at the end of, or January 22nd, 1901. And after, publicly, in 1931, there was never a Governor General appointed to Canada, as per even the External Affairs quote that I read. So how does a King of England appoint a Governor General in 1946? Well, he did. And then he said, I'm going to command the Parliament of Canada to create a commission that's going to create letters patent so that my Governor General can do what I want him to do. And they did. Okay, but is it legal? Is it lawful? Well, of course not, but do they care? Once again, the people aren't paying attention. So in 1947, these letters patent were created for the Governor General. Now, here's what's interesting. In these letters patent, there's a clause that I want to read for you, because it's very interesting as to why they would put this in. So here, this is done by the council, okay, that was created by the Parliament of Canada. And in there, they see, as he says, now, greetings, whereas certain letters patent under the Great Seal bearing date of Westminster, 23rd day of March, 1931. 23rd day of March, 1931 was the last time a Governor General was given to Canada. His late Majesty King George V did constitute, order, and declare that there should be a Governor General and Commander-in-Chief in and over Canada, and that person filling that office, Governor General and Commander-in-Chief, should be from time to time appointed by the Commission under the royal sign, manual, and signet. Well, that's great. So it's before the Statute of Westminster, March of 1931. And whereas St. James, as on the 23rd day of March 1931, his late Majesty King George V did cause certain instructions under the royal sign, manual, and signet to be given to the Governor General and Commander-in-Chief. And whereas it is our will and pleasure to revoke those letters patent. Oh, wait a minute. So King George is now revoking the letters patent that were created by King George V. So King George VI is revoking them. In this letters patent written by the Commission appointed by the Parliament of Canada. So it's not, doesn't even come from England. This comes from the Parliament of Canada. Remember that. Revoke these letters patent and instructions to substitute other provisions in place thereof. Now, since December of 1931, there has never been appointed a Governor General to Canada. So how can he revoke, March 31, letters patent that were revoked by the Statute of Westminster in December? They were already revoked. So now he's revoking them yet again. So we read on. And now, therefore, we do by these presents revoke and determine the said letters patent, everything therein contained and all amendments thereto, and the said instructions, but without prejudice to anything lawfully done under law. And I love that, under lawfully. Excuse me? And we do declare our will and pleasure as follows. So he goes on to explain, we do hereby constitute or order and declare that there shall be a Governor General, Commander-in-Chief in and over Canada, and appointments to the office of the Governor General, Commander-in-Chief, and over Canada shall be made by the Commission under the Great Seal of Canada. So now, oh, whoopsie, what's going on here? So this letters patent aren't being issued by England and signed by the Court and Chancery because, hey, the Court and Chancery doesn't have the land anymore. They gave it to we the people under the Statute of Westminster. So they say, well, under a commission that was created by the Parliament that ceased to exist in 1931, created this commission, and then under the Great Seal of Canada, which died in 1931 with the Statute of Westminster. So they go on to talk about this and the Great Seal and all these great, wonderful things that they're going to be doing. And then it comes to Section 7. And whereas by the British North American Acts 1867 to 1946, it is amongst our things enacted that shall be lawful for us, if we think fit to authorize our Governor General to appoint any person or persons jointly or severally to be his deputy or deputies in any parts of Canada and the exercise. So basically what he's saying here is that the Governor General now could appoint lieutenant governors. Isn't that interesting? So what's happening? Are we going back to being what, the Dominion of Canada? But we can't, because it's not being appointed by the British Empire. So how could we be the Dominion of Canada if the British Empire doesn't appoint a Governor General? Can't. So he goes on, and it's an interesting read. I'm not going to read it all, but he goes on secession, which is Section 8, and we do hereby declare our pleasure to be that in the event of death, incapacity, overall Governor General of Canada, blah, 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 all the powers and authorities herein granted to him shall, until our further pleasure is signified, therein invested in our Chief Justice. So instead of the Governor General having the powers, if he drops dead, it goes to the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court. Interesting stuff. So at the end of the day, these letters patent, and this is the funny part, and we do further declare that our letters patent shall take effect on the first day of October 1947. Okay, so who signed them? You'd think the King of England would sign these, or his court and chancery. But no, signed on behalf by William L. Mackenzie King, Prime Minister of Canada. Unreal. So here we have letters patent and a Governor General. Now the Governor General is not a bad fella. He was appointed, but he only did one thing. In his entire time as Governor General, he did one thing, only one thing. He did an order in council. And we talked about what an order in council is. It's when they work alone. And what did he do? He did the Income Tax Act 1948. That's all he did. From 1946 until 1952, when his position ended, the only thing he ever did was the order in council, the Income Tax Act 1948. And the Parliament of Canada went from being one of the poorest parliamentary politicians in the world to becoming one of the richest, because now they could steal the labor of the people, sovereign people of Canada, and enrich themselves to our detriment. So the fun part here is that in 1952, Alexander Harold of Tunis, he went away, and they decided, well, the King George is dead at this point, King George VI, and so they still haven't gone into the British Commonwealth. Now, the British Commonwealth is still not, Canada isn't a part of it. So what they did, they said, okay, Queen Elizabeth, why don't we designate you, you designate yourself Queen of Canada. And she goes, yeah, okay, I'm Queen of Canada. And then, whoops, well, how do we get Canada to do it? Well, we're going to get Canada the Illegal and Unlawful Parliament to create a little thing called the Royal Styles and Titles Act. By the way, you could download this off of our website. It's up there as well. And it's current as of May 22nd, 2019. I like to keep everything as current as possible for people when they read this stuff. But this was done in 1952. And the reality is, here's what it did. This is funny, I'm sorry. I get a chuckle every time I read this. Assent to Royal Styles and Titles. This is Section 2 of that Act. There's only two sections. Section 1, this Act may be cited as the Royal Styles and Titles Act. Section 2, Assent to the Royal Styles and Titles Act. The assent of Parliament of Canada is hereby given to ensure Her Majesty of her royal proclamation, under the seal of Canada, establishing for Canada the following royal styles and titles, namely. So, the Queen of Canada now proclaims Elizabeth II, by grace of God, of the United Kingdom, Canada, and her other realms and territories, Queen, head of the Commonwealth, defender of the faith, Queen of Canada. So the Queen of Canada, in 1952, declares herself the Queen of Canada.
I wasn't even really sure that we had a Queen of Canada. Who the heck is the Queen of Canada?
Well, the Illegal and Unlawful Parliament created the Royal Styles and Titles Act, and she, under that, made a proclamation declaring herself Queen of Canada.
That's yeah. To me, it's kind of confusing. It makes no sense. Like, who's this entity?
What?
What is this entity? Yeah.
Well, and how? First of all, and people argue with me. I said, the British North American Act in the archives in Ottawa is. Have you read it? And they go, oh. And I said, who's the queen that they're referring to? Oh, that's Queen Elizabeth. I said, well, then you haven't read it. What do you mean? I said, Section 2 was repealed. Now who's the Queen of Canada? Oh, that's Queen Victoria. Yeah, so what Queen of Canada do we have? So, the Illegal and Unlawful Parliament in 1952 declared, through the Royal Styles and Titles Act, created a proclamation for the Queen of Canada to declare herself Queen of Canada. Now, this Illegal and Unlawful Parliament said, okay, Queen of Canada, we're going to give you land. Well, the land we don't own, we're going to give to you. So they did. They gave her a bunch of land that they had no title to give her. And she said, okay, that's Crown land. And then she said, under the Indian Act, I'm now the Queen under the Indian Act. And all that treaty land is now Crown land. But I can't take title to it, so I'm just a manager. And then Ottawa says, well, yeah, I mean, we don't have any land under our feet either. We can't become a sovereign nation, but we could pretend we do. Because we've enacted you, and you proclaim to be Queen of Canada, and now you claim land, but you don't have a allodial title to it. In other words, the land that you're claiming is management only. That's fine. But we'll say we're sovereign anyways. Wink, wink. And people went, oh, okay. And I've always asked this question. I said, okay, so the government of Canada is sovereign and the Queen of Canada is sovereign. Please provide the eminent domain. And they go, well, it's not that hard. If you're sovereign, you have eminent domain. And well, do you not have eminent domain? And that's the answer you get. In order for a government to be sovereign, it must have eminent domain. In order for a monarch to be sovereign, they must have eminent domain. In the United Kingdom, under a constitutional monarchy, both the Parliament and the monarch have eminent domain. Here in Canada, neither have eminent domain. As a matter of fact, if you were to go to Ottawa and figure out who owned the land underneath the Parliament buildings, you'd find that the province of Ontario makes claim to that and collects $2.7 million a year in rent. So what land? So let's I'm just going to jump forward because I'm not going to go into the infinite details or the finite details here. And we're just going to come to what happened in 1982. And it's kind of interesting to see that in 1981, they were doing their thing in Parliament, creating the Canada Bill. And they finally, the Canada Bill was created in the Canadian Parliament under the watchful eye of Pierre Elliott Trudeau. And in that bill was Schedule B. And Schedule B was the Charter of Rights and Freedoms and the British North American Act with its name scratched out to become the Constitution Act, because they couldn't actually enter that act and change anything, considering that they had no enacting clause and couldn't be altered. So they just scratched the name of it off and called it Constitution Act. They did that to all of them just to give continuity. So he goes to England in 1982 and he says to the Queen Elizabeth at the time, she says, Queenie, why don't we take this to your Parliament and have them pass it as a Canada Act, and then I'm going to take it back. And she goes, that's a good idea. We can continue to steal all the wealth from the people. They're a bunch of dummies. They don't know anything. Ha, ha, ha. And he does. I'm not kidding. It's all about a consolidation of power. But the power is sand through their fingers because it's not based in law. And so they pass it and off it goes. And he goes on TV and there she is signing the proclamation. And he's so proud that he's patriating or bringing to Canada for the first time the photocopy of the British North American Act, now with its name scratched out, called the Constitution Act, okay, 1982. And the Charter of Rights and Freedoms. Okay, in order for this to become supreme law in Canada, the Queen of Canada needed to do a proclamation. So on April the 17th, 1982, proclamation enforced the Constitution Act 1982 by Elizabeth II, by the grace of God of the United Kingdom, Canada, and her other realms and territories, Queen, head of the Commonwealth, defender of the faith. By the way, that little thing in 1952 brought Canada into the Commonwealth, even though it wasn't a sovereign nation. And, we just fudge things. So the proclamation goes on. It says, whereas in the past certain amendments to the Constitution of Canada have been made by the Parliament of the United Kingdom at the request and with the consent of Canada. Now, when they say amendments to the Constitution, they're actually referring to the British North American Act. And the British North American Act was never a constitution. But they're not going to tell you that. And then they go on and says, and whereas it is in accord with the status of Canada as an independent state that Canadians be able to amend their constitution in Canada in all respects. It goes on about blah, 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 but more about the constitution or what they deem as a constitution. And then it comes down to this. And whereas section 58 of the Constitution Act, 1982, set out in Schedule B to the Canada Act, provides that the Constitution Act 1982 shall, and this is the most important 4 words you're going to hear, shall, subject to section 59, therefore come into force on a day to be fixed by a new proclamation issued under the Great Seal of Canada. So you go, wait a minute, subject to section 59. What does that mean? Well, and if you're going to get into it, we can go and look at what was section 59. Here we go here. So section 59, paragraph 1, refers to section 23(1)(a), shall come into force in respect of Quebec on a day to be fixed by proclamation issued by the Queen or the Governor General under the Great Seal of Canada. Well, what is section 23(1)(a)? Minority language educational rights, 23(1), citizens of Canada, A, whose first language learned and still understood is that of the English or French linguistic minority population of the province in which they reside. Wow, what does that mean? Well, it means that if this, because this has to be repealed, section 23(1)(a) needs to be repealed, and if they do that, there will only be one language in Canada. English. So how many people believe that the French in Quebec would ever sign off and ratify this document? Exactly. Yeah. And that's the problem. They went to Meech Lake, it failed. They went to Charlottetown, it failed. After Charlottetown, they just said, okay, fuck it. We're not going to say anything anymore. We're just going to pretend that it's in force. It's not in force, but let's pretend it is. And that's exactly what they've been doing. All this time, there's never been another proclamation because Section 23(1)A has never been repealed. The Charter of Rights and Freedoms and the Constitution Act, 1867, has actually never been ratified. In other words, it's been signed off by 9 provinces, but the 10th one never did, and Quebec never will. So they're working with what we call without a net. So let's take a quick look at the Charter of Rights and Freedoms. And I find this very interesting because when you go down there, down through this thing, there are, I think there's 34 sections. We get into Section 32. Section 32(1) says, this charter applies, A, to the Parliament and Government of Canada in respect of all matters within the authority of Parliament, including all matters relating to the Yukon Territory and Northwest Territories, and to the legislature and government of each province in respect of all matters within the authority of the legislature of each province. So who does this apply to? Not the men and women, not the sovereign people of Canada, but it applies to the de facto government in Ottawa and their subcorporations, the province governments. Now there's an exception. This is the fun part. Exception. It says, notwithstanding subsection 1, section 15 shall not have effect until 3 years after this section comes into force. Well, considering that it's never been ratified, it never came into force. But let's just run up to section 15 for a second and see what that says, because this is interesting. So equality of rights, equality before and under law, equal protection and benefit of law. I wonder what law they're referring to, because there's no jurisdiction stated within any of these documents. So it's just whatever law that they say is law. So 15(1) says, every individual is equal before and under the law and has the right to equal protection and equal benefit of the law without discrimination, and in particular, without discrimination based on race, national or ethnic region, color, religion, sex, age, or mental or physical disability. So isn't that interesting? So every individual. So if we go to a law dictionary and look up individual, it's not in there. So we have to go to a regular dictionary like Merriam-Webster's, and it says person. So we know from the Interpretations Act of Canada, because they don't have any definitions here in equality, so we have to use the Interpretations Act of Canada, that an individual, if it's a person, and a person is a corporation, according to them. So let's read this in real English. Every corporation is equal before and under the law and has the right to equal protection and equal benefit of the law without discrimination. I'll stop there. So what law, A, are they talking about? And B, the last time I looked in the mirror, I certainly wasn't a legal fiction. Now, this was supposed to come into effect 3 years after the second proclamation. Well, as we know, there was no second proclamation. And so this whole sham applies to nobody. But because they continue to push it upon us, even though they haven't legally brought it into, well, it can't be brought into law, because it's just amazing. You read the British North American Act, there is no jurisdiction of law that it's under, because it was letters patent created by the English Parliament under English common law. But as letters patent, it was never to be given to anybody except the Governor General, period. So they never had to include a jurisdiction of law. It was never a constitution. The Charter of Rights and Freedoms, once again, no jurisdiction of law. The proclamation makes a claim to supreme law, but supreme law is, well, it's like saying unicorn law. Well, you're under unicorn law. Excuse me, what law book is that under? Please and thank you. It's a fictitious jurisdiction. along with the fictitious law that they're making claim that you're under, except you're not under. An individual is a person is a corporation. So how can you be under this? But this is how they maintain their power and wealth and status over you. And they needed to lock this in because we come back to Section 109 of the British North American Act, that they have the photocopy in the archives in Ottawa that states very clearly that they own the resources. Our resources belong to us, we the people, not to them, not for them to manage, not for them to regulate. Belongs to us.